Like many a small boy, growing up a Manchester United supporter, it's hard to imagine ever supporting any other club. With an estimated 660 million fans across the world, Manchester United are truly one of the biggest sporting names in history. As a good friend often says, Manchester United is the one constant I've ever had in my life. I've had different jobs, friends and even girlfriends, but United are always there for me. But just for a moment, imagine a world without United. No Old Trafford, no Busby, no Sir Alex. Yet on the 19th of December 1931, the end of Manchester United Football Club was a very real possibility. It was the end of the line for the team that had started out as a side made up of railway workers. With more debts than assets and no further credit on offer from the bank, the end was about to be signalled. Until the intervention of one man, James William Gibson. A proud member of the Gibson family and one of the few people that really remember James Gibson is Alan Embling. Alan has spent a considerable part of his later life keeping the name of the man he simply remembers as Uncle Jim in the public eye. So here we are.
Here we are.
Inside the Theatre of Dreams.
Absolutely.
What's it feel like this morning on a beautiful day like this?
Oh, it's incredible. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, this stadium, as it is, it would be an absolute dream that my uncle would have absolutely, it was incredible, wonderful.
James Gibson was 50 when he took the decision to save United and ensure that Manchester had two football clubs. But what drove him to take this extraordinary step that would change not only the club, but his own life forever?
Walter Crickmer, the then secretary, who unfortunately died in the Munich crash, he went to my uncle's house, Eleanor and Hale Barnes, and it was a little bit pre-arranged. They knew he was going to come and so on, but he actually left the house an hour later with a cheque for £2,000 in his pocket. £2,000 nowadays doesn't sound a lot of money, but in 1931, the height of a depression, then it was a hell of a lot of money, and that was an outright gift to pay the backlog of the salaries of the players. They were going to have a jolly bleak Christmas. They knew that he was keen on sport. My uncle was always very keen on sport. He belonged to the cricket, life member of the cricket club. He followed the rugby. He didn't follow it up till he took over Manchester United, a lot of the football, but he was keen on sport. And as he said to his uncle William Fell, there's enough room in Manchester for two football clubs. And so therefore, he had City, which were doing well, yeah. United were doing badly. And so he then decided that he would risk. And he was also behind him had a most wonderful, courageous wife, Lillian, who actually supported her husband and stood by. Not many wives would have done that.
What would have happened if that money had not been handed over that day?
There would be no Manchester United now. The bank had closed on them. If the bank had closed on them, that was it. They were finished.
A gift of £2,000, the equivalent of £110,000 in today's terms, was a quite remarkable act of benevolence. The Gibson guarantee, as it was to be known, would be followed up by Gibson taking full charge of the club, becoming chairman and president. In December 1932, Gibson was to set a precedent for the future by appointing the club's first Scottish manager, Scott Duncan. And in the 33-34 season, Gibson negotiated with the Railway Authority for steps to be built from the platform just outside the ground and for trains to stop there on match days. Attendances would steadily rise throughout the next few seasons, and the train station would remain a focal point for those meeting on match days. And it is still used today by supporters. In 2001, a plaque was unveiled by Trafford Borough Council in the memory of James Gibson on the bridge just outside Old Trafford Stadium. Hundreds of thousands of fans walk past this plaque each season, but how many really know its true meaning? In the following seasons, the team won promotion back to Division 1, only to yo-yo backwards and forwards between the two top divisions. In 1936-37, the Manchester United Junior Athletic Club was formed, a brainchild of Gibson and Crickmer. It was to be the basis of youth development, which long after the death of its founders would go on to create such immortal players such as Charlie Mitten, Duncan Edwards, Roger Byrne, Paul Scholes, and of course United's record-breaking appearance maker, Ryan Giggs. There's a small section of the museum inside Old Trafford dedicated to James Gibson, and the plaque alongside United's other saviour, John Henry Davis, is on the wall of the new players' tunnel. To the vast majority of Manchester United fans, the name James Gibson is one that has perhaps been forgotten. But at a club like United, there are die-hard fans that do know the history of the club, some of who are on their own personal missions to keep the true history of United alive. Now we're talking about James Gibson today, who saved the club on the 19th of December. It's the 15th today, so it's the nearest game to it. How important was that, and how important is it to remember?
Well, if you read, I mean, I'd recommend either the Percy Young original or the Geoffrey Green History of United, which chronicles those events. And not only is it fascinating, but it's scary that this club could have, gone bankrupt, and without him, the efforts they made, and these were times where we were nearly relegated. We faced Mill in a battle through our existence, really, on that last game of the season. And you think there are certain individuals in my mind, Harold Hardman, James Gibson, and Jimmy Murphy, who the fans recognise, but there isn't that element possibly beyond that there should be. And I think all three kept this club going.
The stuff that they were doing behind the scenes in the 30s when United didn't have any money was fundamental to us being the club we are today. For example, 50% of all first team players coming through to play for the club have come through the youth system. So it's part of our culture, part of our foundation, part of our history. I think not just the financial legacy, because if it wasn't for James's fantastic benevolence to the club would have gone under, there's no doubt about that. So the club we have today is purely down to his goodwill, but the things he was doing behind the scenes was equally important, not just the financial stuff. As I mentioned, the formation of the reserves in the youth team. He brought a lot of other members of staff to the club, like Walter Crickmer and people like this, who carried on long after his death in the early 50s.
It could be argued that United wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Gibson. They'd have gone out of their business at the time, for definite. I think he gave £2,000, which doesn't sound a lot, but at the time, 1931, it was a lot of money.
Can you imagine what life would be like if he hadn't have done that?
Well, who knows? Who knows?
The club was in huge debt, and it was in a time when, in the 1930s, when the economy was struggling, and Walter Crickmer went to James Gibson's house and persuaded him to put some money into the club to tide it over at least through the Christmas period, and that's what he agreed to do. And it was effectively a gift with no strings attached. Saved Manchester United from going into liquidation, in effect, and kept the debtors at bay, at least for that period, and enough money even to buy a turkey for each of the players for Christmas. So it was the start of a relationship with the club, which became really instrumental in setting up the club to be the club that it is today.
80 years ago, 30,000 quid, he saved Manchester United from going to the wall. And it was a major achievement. As we get on with the introductions, before we speak to, hear from Alan Embling, a nephew of James Gibson, first to say a few words, the Mayor of Trafford, Jane Moore.
Without that commitment, dedication that he put in, Manchester United would not be the team it is today. So we have so much to be grateful for to this man. But what really is important is that we talk to people about James Gibson.
In March 1941, Old Trafford was hit by a Luftwaffe bomb which destroyed the stadium and the surrounding area. James Gibson was devastated, but he would not let this setback defeat him and quickly started making arrangements to rebuild the club for a second time. He negotiated with neighbours City for United to play their home games at Main Road until Old Trafford could be rebuilt. The United Phoenix was about to rise again, and this time it was to rise greater than ever before.